Welcome back to another video, guys. It's your boy Wraith Hoops, and we have to talk about Zion Williamson. At this point in the season, obviously there's no amazing news going on in the league, but you have to appreciate what's happened, and where the future of the league relies. Really, Zion Williamson is part of that future. Now, the whole Mariah Mills situation is a little bit of a blemish on his social career, so to speak, and honestly on his playing career. His injuries have created much speculation that he will never be the prospect that everybody hoped he would be. Remember, in the days when he was at Duke and even in high school, he was a man amongst boys. Standing now at 6'6", 284, even then when people considered him to be in better shape, he was still jumping out the gym at 250 plus pounds and slamming the ball into the goal on centers, point guards, anybody that was really in the way. And he does have the strength to back it up, which is what makes it even more tantalizing and made him a really impressive prospect to even begin with. In my eyes, he was really a prospect touted even higher than Ben Simmons was. And many people believe that Ben Simmons would have been the next player to have LeBron type skills and just be as impactful as a LeBron James caliber player in the prospect world leading into the league. With Zion Williamson, his was more of a raw athleticism standpoint. He wasn't much of a great shooter, especially in college and even in the league now. While he does shoot above 30%, averaging across his entire career, he shot less than 1-3 on average per game, which means that he understands he's not a terrifically good shooter, but he also is willing to not shoot his team out of a game just to prove that he can and is willing to take that shot. At the tender age of 23 years old, he still stands at roughly 6'6", 284, so he has the size to bang with anybody on the inside. It's really just about his lower body allowing him to do it, because we've seen what he can do. He can jump right out of a comic book. He can jump through your TV screen. But the issue is his body can't hold up. And that's what has so many people so ready to label him a draft bust, which really, in my eyes, doesn't really make the most sense, because when he plays, the Pelicans are one of the best teams even in the Western Conference, let alone across the entire league. At one point during this season, when he was healthy and playing, they held the #1 seed for a little bit of that stretch of the season until he did end up going down with injury, and they were still a competitive roster even after that. They do have the CJ McCollum after the trade that they made with the Portland Trailblazers, which was really a good one because it offered some substantial upgrades as far as playmaking went and shot creation. CJ McCollum can shoot the lights out, particularly from the catch. You also have Brandon Ingram still on that team. So add to the mix the Herb Jones of the world, the Trey Murphys, the Larry Nances. They did pick up Cody Zeller in free agency from the runner-ups from last season, the Miami Heat. They still managed to retain Willie Hernan-Gomez. They have Jonas Valanciunas, which was a very interesting tandem, having him and Zion on the floor when they're both particularly not good shooters, but they made it work actually surprisingly well. And they also have a younger guard in that man, Jose Grand Theft Alvarado, whose specialty move has earned him that name because he just loves to play defense really all 94 feet. You also have the Dyson Daniels of the world and Kira Lewis Jr. You have comfortable pieces around them from a depth standpoint. You just need the top half of the team to really take that next step because they are younger. You do see Brandon Ingram becoming really, in some people's eyes, the newest version of Kevin Durant. Obviously, I have a separate video about Bol possibly being able to take the next step. Many people feel like his personality clashes with coaches too much at this point because they keep tossing him around like a hot potato, and everybody knows that he has the potential to be that Kevin Durant type player. But for now, Brandon Ingram is that closest comparison, even though they're not necessarily primetime television. Now, I say all that to just put into mind the fact that the Pelicans with Zion are a good team, and even without him, they're a very good team. They just don't have the ability at the moment to push themselves over the hump and force themselves into contender status. Now, when Zion is finally fully healthy and he can finally last the entirety of an NBA season, we're going to see something special. There is no debate. I'm not willing to entertain the possibility of people saying that Zion even when he plays isn't good, because that's frankly just false. Last season, in his limited minutes and limited games that he played, he averaged 26, 7, and 5. So the man can flat out play. He shoots decent enough from the field. Obviously, most of his shots come at the rim, simply because of his athleticism and his reliance on that aspect of his game, similar to an early career Blake Griffin in a sense. But he's still proven that he's willing to take a three if you do leave him open, and he's not going to hit it all the time, but he's going to hit it enough for you to honor it. And while it hasn't worked out terrifically, it gives him the opportunity to just bully ball his way downhill in the event that somebody does put a hand up or somebody just closes out just a little too strong. And he is not afraid to blow by, showing very surprisingly flashy quickness. And it's almost as though early career Stephen Curry, even though Curry shot obviously terrifically from the floor, he was known as being a three-point sniper. They had the elevator doors play and that Mark Jackson offense previous to Stephen Kerr coming in and just kind of pushing that system to the next level. You saw Curry deal with a lot of ankle injuries. And while it's not the same now, we have seen him have supports in his shoe. So maybe Zion just needs a complete overhaul as far as the tech that he's wearing in games to make sure that, just for a precaution's sake, he doesn't injure himself significantly going forward. But the simple fact of the matter is, if he manages to lose just a little bit of weight and he plays a little less, not necessarily athletically, but a little less pointedly going downhill at the rim, just adding a little bit more of a finesse and skill to his game can not only lengthen out the time of his career, but also make him a phenomenally more difficult player to guard. And he already is a hard player to guard just off the strength of the fact of how big he is. He's only 6'6", but people can't stop him at the rim simply because he's so heavy. And with that heaviness, many people considered Kenny Lofton Jr. to be the guy that coming into the league at his massive weight and height, being roughly 6'6", 6'7" himself, the closest comparison to him was Zion Williamson. But Zion literally jumps off the page. So that comparison, while being the closest for Kenny Lofton, isn't the same for Zion, because Zion does have the bounce of really a prime LeBron in a sense, but he's also the size of some of the centers in old days, and really a couple of centers now, not necessarily, your Rudy Gobert's, but maybe your Jonas Valanciunas. Really, that's the closest comparison weight-wise off the top of my head that I could come up with. But I do have to address the actual problem, the whole elephant in the room, which is his ability to be sustainably on the court for long periods of time. Because whether I like it or not, and whether any fan likes it or not, particularly Pelicans fans, because they went from having Anthony Davis to trading him away and having a few pieces and then retooling and being really bad enough to pick the Zion Williamsons of the world. They had DeMarcus Cousins at one point with Anthony Davis, and that Twin Towers lineup was something that many people didn't expect to work, but they were both effective enough playmakers and shot decently enough from the floor for them to make that system work. And it was beautiful to watch up until Boogie got hurt. Now, having an entirely different roster that's much younger now, having the Zion Williamson as your really franchise player and Brandon Ingram still being arguably the best player on that roster pound for pound, Zion has to be available. They say the best ability is availability. And while I don't entirely agree, there's some players obviously that can play all 82 games. But if you're not particularly good at your craft, you being available for 82 games doesn't really help your team beyond a certain standing point. If I'm Zion and in the first season he played, he only had 24 games. Second season, he did play 61 games, so he had a decent enough sample size, and he did average his career high to this point of 27 points and 7 rebounds. He also averaged 3.5 assists at that point, so he was a decent enough playmaker to make him more problematic than just a big guy that dunks the basketball. In the 2021-2022 season, he didn't play at all because of his foot injury. And then in the 2022-2023 season, he did manage to play 29 games at about 33 minutes per game. And he did average, like I said, 26, 7, and 4.5, 5. So he's definitely a solid player. He's gotten better on the defensive side of the ball because a lot of people had those questions early on, especially as a rookie. He was getting hounded by critics because he didn't move his feet very well. He loved to get in passing lanes, but he didn't really move his feet and get in the way that he needed to stay in front of people. He loved to get blocks, even though he hasn't averaged above a block a game. He still was a highlight reel on both sides of the floor, and people loved to watch him. He had a lot of shock and a lot of fan value. So going into this next season, obviously his rookie year, he averaged 0.7 steals, then 0.9. He didn't play that next year. But last season he averaged 1.1 steals. So he is getting better in that defensive side of the ball categories. But we need to see more of him. We know what he can do when he plays, but it's about him being able to play on a night in and night out basis, and also just being there for his teammates. We see him locked in. We see him congratulating people. We see positive looks from him on the floor when he does play, but it's just about him being available in those times. Admittedly, the foot injuries and all the lower body extremity injuries that we've seen out of him are not necessarily what you would love to see, particularly out of a big that weighs as heavy as he does, but they're not necessarily career-ending injuries. You're not seeing, for example, the KD injury where he tore his Achilles and had to get surgery. And for most people, that's where your athleticism dies and you become an afterthought. But Kevin Durant was able to come back from even that injury, which was impressive in and of itself for him to be able to play still really similarly to the top of his game, even though he does shoot more jumpers and attacks the rim a little bit less. But I would like to see Zion, like I said, shed a few pounds, round out his game with a stronger jumper, being open to taking more threes, even though he shouldn't make it to a point where he's just jacking them like Julius Randle, because that's the issue that Julius Randle has. He, in essence, shoots his team out of basketball games with bad shot selections from the three-point line. He settles. You don't want Zion to settle, even though he does have his injury history. And the good news is he always seems to be in good spirits about what's going on, his rehab and everything. So it's reasonable to assume that he's not going to get into a situation where he loses confidence in his own play, similar to a Ben Simmons kind of situation. I believe that Zion will always be Zion. And coming into this next season, we should expect him to come back, being fully healthy, being ready to ball, and joining in with that roster that's already cemented, seeing them make not just a playoff push, but being healthily in the playoff picture, maybe not necessarily to a contender status, but if you can have Zion even 70 games out of the season, that's going to be a very dangerous team going forward. With that being said, good morning, good evening, good night, no matter where you are on the globe watching. Thanks for tuning in. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, turn on those post notifications, and let me know if you guys would like a Patreon, because I would like to present more content. Obviously, the YouTube's not exactly big enough to enjoy the full benefits, and I don't have the time necessarily to jump on things the way I would love to. But just let me know if you guys would be interested in some more personalized content where I would let you guys, suggest more topics. Let me know specifically what you would like me to focus on going forward, and seeing some behind the scenes footage, because I feel like that would be interesting too. With that being said, I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.